And using this process known as reinforcement learning with human feedback, they basically made it align better with the needs of GPT-3 developers. So with Instruct GPT, when you enter a prompt, you get back an answer which is more suitable to what you are asking, the kind of format or template or quality of response. And there were improvements across safety and trust as well. And so basically, it was pretty significant in my opinion, because up until this year, we weren't even sure if language models could be made safer.
Synthesia.
Bexy Future, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Brett, and for that wonderful intro. I'm really excited to chat today.
All right. Well, I'm excited too. Okay. So why don't we just start with, how did you first get engaged around generative AI or OpenAI? Where does this story start?
I was waiting and chomping for some kind of breakthrough in the AI research world. I kind of felt at times it was in a lull. I had been sort of watching it. It was on the radar. And then GPT-3 came along. And so back then it was hard to get access. Somehow, by the grace of God, I managed to get access. Then I even made a video on how I got access to GPT-3 because it was so exclusive at the time. And immediately, you know, every once in a while, you get a taste of the future. You get a little piece of cheese. And from there, there's a kernel of inspiration. And not just the inspiration is there, but you can sometimes see around the corner. And so basically, just by using GPT-3 and anyone who was using it, it was obvious that the technology is going to head towards images next. And so from summer 2020 to spring 2021, I was starting to think about, you know, what would the image version of GPT-3 look like? And so not much longer, OpenAI announced DALL-E, which was their image to text model. And then in 2021, towards the end, I dropped a series. So it's like 23 videos on what GPT-3, DALL-E, what they mean for the future of human creativity. And of course, I had made that series last year before I'd even tried DALL-E, because DALL-E 1 was never released publicly.
Right.
And then fast forward to this year, 2022, DALL-E 2 was released, you know, GPT-3 and the latest one, ChatGPT, is, you know, bigger, it's going gangbusters, safer. And so I've got to not only make a comprehensive series about this world, but also I got to live through it. So I was an early DALL-E 2 user. One of my more famous images was a confused grizzly bear in calculus class. And so not only did that go viral, but it's kind of become a technical benchmark in the industry. So when Google launched Imagen, and I believe the other one's called Party, and Facebook launched their version for video, they used that prompt, a confused grizzly bear in calculus class. And so very fun contribution for me. And so I've kind of been living through my series. That's all I'm saying. And then basically like maybe in September, I dropped part 2 of that series as well, focusing on what's after DALL-E 2 now. Like, what can we expect next year? So that's been my journey up to this point.
Well, it's not surprising that you focus on what's next, because Future is your last name, at least in this manifestation.
On the internet.
On the internet, you are Future. If we go back to 2020, it struck me that it was amazing, but it was parlor tricks. The thing that's different this year, and I think it is really this year, we saw a little bit of it in 2021, but people are using these for everyday use cases. It's like, you know, we talked about this idea of in production with the virtual humans, which in the voice clones, which started off Synthesia 2 today. But now we're seeing the text generators, image generators, this year, they started being used every day by professionals as this tool, as this co-pilot to execute processes that in the past, it really would have been up entirely to the human.
Yeah, part of the reason a lot of the key OpenAI community believes so strongly in OpenAI, and also we all saw this coming, like it was obvious to us. The secret was that there's a research paper OpenAI put out at the same time as GPT-3, and it outlines a technical thing known as the scaling laws. And so basically the idea behind the scaling laws is, with these AI models, whether they're GPT-3 like text-based or multimodal like DALL-E, or some image or music kind of thing, some music or movie kind of thing, as you scale up the parameters of the model, as you give it more data and as you train it longer, we just see better performance across the board for all of these different things. And so if you knew that secret, that when we make these models bigger, we do this thing, it's science, right? So you can look at a chart and know how much the performance will improve. Now, eventually these laws may tap out. We may run into some fundamental limit, but even now we haven't quite answered that question. And so that's why it's not a surprise. Like I think, last year it was obvious to me that professionals will be using it this year. I put out an article last year saying that GPT-3 is going to go viral on school campuses, both high school and college, and that is also happening. This month was, I think, the big breakthrough on school campuses. So it's kind of just like other things in tech. Like if you've worked in tech, it's all about Moore's law. Well, if you work in AI, and if you're in this space of synthetic media, what underpins us is the scaling laws. And scaling laws, you could argue, are a subset of Moore's law.
Interesting. Like I haven't like heard anybody really talk about it in relation to Moore's law. I think there's probably is a law associated with it. We might call it the Sutskever law, because I recall a story about him back when he was in graduate school. Ilya Sutskever is one of the co-founders of OpenAI. And back in graduate school, what he observed was every time he added parameters, added training, everything got better. And it wasn't always clear why, other than they added parameters and added data. And so it's really interesting that we're headed in that direction. Now, there is a debate about scale in terms of just more in terms of larger data sets, larger models, and making them more efficient. Because there's a cost associated with that, which we can talk about. But like, what I'm most interested to talk to you about is the big changes this year. Everybody's been talking about ChatGPT like nonstop through the last, what has it been, 14 days now? Yeah, just 2 weeks since that came out. But there were some other things that happened earlier this year that actually were precursors to that. And let's not forget, a lot of things have happened, multiple iterations of some of these text to image models as well.
Yeah, probably the biggest thing right out the gate was Instruct GPT. And so this is an OpenAI training approach where they basically took their existing GPT-3 model, and using this process known as reinforcement learning with human feedback, they basically made it align better with the needs of GPT-3 developers. So with Instruct GPT, when you enter a prompt, you get back an answer which is more suitable to what you are asking, the kind of format or template or quality of response. And there were improvements across safety and trust as well. And so basically, it was pretty significant in my opinion, because up until this year, we weren't even sure if language models could be made safer. And so it was very beneficial. And, very early on, I found Instruct GPT was so good, I was already using it often as a Google search alternative. We could talk more about that. I mean, obviously, there's still risks that these models can still make up and hallucinate information. But yeah, that was huge. And, ChatGPT, DaVinci 3.5, which was announced last month, past few weeks, they're sort of the next iteration of the Instruct GPT work, which I was a huge fan and advocate of. It sort of had this other side effect too, where it reduced the need to do prompt design. Most of the time, the model would just know what kind of answer you're looking for. So, Instruct GPT, monster breakthrough. Then probably May of this year, we had DALL-E 2. It was announced, beta. Pretty much that's when I think creatives' eyebrows started to get raised. And, you also had Midjourney going on and stuff. And basically, like, the DALL-E community started to grow. The AI art conversation started happening overnight. People started learning the word prompt. Like, I rarely have to explain the word prompt anymore. Last year, that would be half the conversation. Half the conversation would be explaining prompt design. The other half would be explaining how to even get access to this stuff. And this year, we're just not having those issues, right? Like, I can go more nitty gritty. And so anyways, DALL-E was huge, changed creativity forever. I don't know what else to say, like movies, like every artist, like every, game studio, film studio, every creative is, thinking about how to incorporate AI into their workflow. And then sort of Stable Diffusion came along, open source side. We saw not just a DALL-E competitor emerge overnight, but, in my view, we did see them take significant market share. They spurred
more
a lot
users. There's more users. I'd like 10 million users as of September on Stable Diffusion. That's just on Stability AI, actually. There must be double that when you look at all the variants.
Yeah. People are building, cool libraries, tools on top of it. They're finding ways to make it more efficient. All these companies basically integrated it overnight, like Canva and some other ones. And then, I guess what's interesting now, I checked the Google Trends data last week, comparing Dolly, Midjourney, Stable Diffusion, and actually Midjourney is the one that is now getting a significant bump over the others. And so we could chat about why I think that is, why Midjourney appears to be having the upper hand. Yeah, so part of the reason I think Midjourney is just doing so well is I just think they understand the needs of artists better than anybody else on the market. For some reason, every artist I know just loves a Midjourney render. It brings them great joy, even if it's if it's like a bad one or an off one. And it's kind of the art they want to make. And I think they've done a good job just engaging with their community. I think they had a vision, they stuck with it. And I think this is just a case of consistency. Like when you take a look at Midjourney version 4, that kind of stuff, like, they've clearly been heads down. They haven't been caught up in all the other stuff going on. And so, anyways, it's just interesting because it's kind of like a Game of Thrones. Like every month, some other company is, wanting up the other. They come up with point 4, 0.2. They have, suddenly everybody flocks back to them to try to use it and see the difference. And so they're sort of also competing. So that was another significant event. And then jumping to now, I'd say the other significant event was ChatGPT. And I think this is definitely a turning point. This is the mainstreamification of GPT-3. I already thought GPT-3 was mainstream, but I'm super in a bubble. Right. So super bubble.
You are in a bubble. It was not mainstream.
Yeah.
There are people in my industry that I come from, the conversational AI industry, who were never using it or had never used it. They knew of it. They'd seen the outputs, but they didn't want to go through the trouble of signing up and using, which is the interface, which, is not, it's okay if you're an engineer, if you want to experiment, but it's not great for everyone. But chat, everyone's used it. It's amazing.
Yeah, and I think ChatGPT is a product that I think they've it's a culmination of years worth of work on OpenAI's part, right? There's the UI, right? So clearly, chat is the preference of most people. I'd say a lot of young people. It feels like an assistant, right? There's a lot of safety stuff built into ChatGPT. That is years worth of research and development going in to make it safe. On top of that, OpenAI released it fully to the public, which they don't normally do. Normally, it's a closed beta. Select people get access, and then they roll out from there. This time, I think because they were confident in the safety, and they figured out their cost infrastructure, right? Basically, they're able to offer it essentially to the whole world. And this is just like many years of It's something that's been culminating and brewing for many years. They've been cooking, and now I think they're just striking when the iron's hot. And so it's no surprise, right, that everybody and their sister is using ChatGPT. My cousin is in high school right now, and he saw somebody using ChatGPT in the library, just on a school computer. And so this kind of stuff is, and now for me, I agree with you. What you're saying is like when I use ChatGPT, I feel kind of ridiculous how I used to use GPT-3 in the past. Like it was so much extra steps, so much extra work. Right. And, I still got value, but again, I was biased, right? Like I'm a true believer. And now when I use ChatGPT, the comparison I made recently on my podcast was basically I was saying like ChatGPT is kind of like driving an automatic. And then when you're in the playground, it's like you're driving a manual. Right. And so some people prefer still classic, you're in the playground, you're writing your prompts, you're configuring temperature and all these other things to the right. I'm more on the other end. Like I prefer ChatGPT. I don't really like writing prompts unless I have to. And I think what might happen is OpenAI might start differentiating between their consumer users as well as their business users, right? And so in my view, if you're a business user, you're going to go into the playground. You're going to use DaVinci 3, right? Text DaVinci 3. And if you're just a consumer, you'll go over to ChatGPT. And it's not mutually exclusive. Like I think the businesses will also use ChatGPT like on the regular. But I think this is sort of an emerging, interesting OpenAI market segment, which they weren't necessarily targeting before.
That's interesting. I can see power users. I can see like solutions for power users, which might be OpenAI or it might be all of the different companies that are using the API to GPT-3. uh, there, I think most people are going to use ChatGPT because it gives what you want. And actually, what we've done, and we'll show some examples later today with Eric, uh, you actually do get different outputs from DaVinci 3, the DaVinci 3 model, which is GPT 3.5, which is similar to ChatGPT. So that's my expectation right now. But I think you're right. There will be some differentiation there. But all the business users I know, they're just happy to use ChatGPT because, the word I look at is it's so erudite. It really is articulate. It really well formulated. It writes better than almost everybody I know. And I know a lot of writers, having been a writer myself for about 20 years in one form or another. So I think it is kind of amazing. Now there is the pushback. So first of all, there's two types of pushback. One is, well, you can ask it questions and it comes back with incorrect information. So that's one thing that we hear a lot about. And what I look at is I say, geez, it's so much less wrong than it was in 2020. It's like amazing how much less wrong it is. So it's more right than it used to be. But that's an important thing. Like it can bring back things, but it added to this other concept that it speaks very confidently. So no matter whether it's true or not, it'll present it as if it's truth. And what do you think about where that thread of discussion is going to go? Is that going to slow people down, or is the juggernaut just moving at such a speed no one can stop it?
I definitely, I love market forces. I think there's something about market forces where I think a lot of people get value from it, right? And even if they're, even if they're aware that there's this risk that it could hallucinate information, they're going to continue using it. And in my cases, I don't get that much hallucinated information. For me, it's maybe 10%, 20% of the outputs I've seen. And
Yeah.
that 80% that's left is tremendously valuable, right? And obviously you all should know I'm biased, right? Like I've been covering this stuff for like 2-3 years now, especially OpenAI products. And so there's that. I think, it will continue to improve. I think OpenAI now will have training data that no other company in the world will have. And they'll be able to improve the model with this very wide training data, various, people, various countries all over the world. I do believe in the reinforcement learning with human feedback approach. There's also a lot to be said as the model scales. We actually don't know the total size that ChatGPT is, but perhaps a larger model will not have these issues. And then I could chat about also where I think ChatGPT is going, but it could also I'll get to that. It could also it may also be able to look stuff up on the web eventually. Like it might be something else. So that will also help with the issue around hallucinating information, because it may be able to look up and see, like, am I making this up? What do other people say? What's the consensus? And also earlier this year, OpenAI announced something called WebGPT. It's essentially a research paper. And what that's all about is essentially it's a language model that talks to Bing and sort of summarizes the web results very crisply and does citations. And it showed some improvement in truthiness. And so there might be some other things there. Like the story of ChatGPT is still ongoing, right? And it's very exciting. And then on top of that, like even at a technical level, like the fundamental problem, and your point is really apt. The fundamental problem with language models, the way they're designed, it's to predict plausible sounding text, right? And so the problem is that it's because it's trained to sound plausible, even when it's wrong, it'll continue to sound plausible, right? And so there is research around removing that plausibility aspect. There's a company called Anthropic, and they're trying to just aim for truthiness rather than plausibility. So some kind of fundamental architectural understanding could really change the game, and maybe it might develop more of a world model, a correct one, rather than what sounds plausible. The lesson with ChatGPT for everyone, and I'd say especially students, all the new students using it to write essays and their chemistry lab and all that stuff, and speaking to you, this is a lesson not just on critical thinking, but what I call adversarial thinking. And so The idea of adversarial thinking is you want to read everything that ChatGPT generates. You not only want to think critically about it, but you also want to assume ChatGPT is an adversary. You want to think deeply, like, does this make sense based on the fact that it might hallucinate or make up plausible sounding information based on other things I've read? You want to look up what it says, cross-reference it on Google and various resources. This is a new literacy skill that needs to be taught in schools. And, I'm hoping understanding of adversarial thinking will spread more, and teachers, parents, and students will learn that, you need to sort of think more critically. Beyond critically, you need to think adversarial with all of these outputs. Anyways, super long-winded answer, but it's a complicated question. Where ChatGPT is going. So to me, this seems like an Easter egg product. I feel like OpenAI has got more in the bag for what this thing does. And because of safety, they're not fully releasing some of those features. They've disabled them. So if we find out that it can look stuff up on the web, game changer, right? Absolute game changer. We already know that it does formatting really well. Like, we talked about the interface, but I think what people love is formatting. Like, it gives you a nice list. It will, give you the code is all nicely cleaned and formatted, and it's got syntax highlighting. I even use it to generate tables for one of my articles. I got it to compare the pros and cons of GPT-3 versus something else I was comparing it to. And so it's just nice. And so what the formatting tells me, based on the product direction that OpenAI may be heading towards, I think they're heading towards, they're never going to say it, but I think they want to make like the ultimate encyclopedia. Like ChatGPT is already kind of like that. Like when you ask it something, it gives you almost like a Wikipedia answer. And so if they end up making it so it can search the web, it's already got formatting. They're going to continue calling it a personal assistant, but it will feel a lot like an on-demand encyclopedia. And of course, the risks of, I don't want to downplay the risks of misinformation, making stuff up. It still sounds like a plausible expert. Those are still there. And you all should know, OpenAI CEO Sam Altman like tweeted last week, like, ChatGPT is great, but it's still got a lot of work to do. You shouldn't fully trust, something along those lines. But anyways, and then the third thing where I think ChatGPT is going, this is where I'm like really speculating. I think that if they connected ChatGPT to all the various APIs that are out there, your calendar, your email, maybe got like something crazy like Stripe, like you run a business and you can just get it to generate charts and stuff. I would be so blown away, because now you can conduct so many of your daily activities, book that meeting with this person, write that email. How much profit did I make this week? Call this person. I don't know, right? Like, so that would also be a game changer. And then a fourth thing, just at a technical level, is I think one of the things we're not sure about with ChatGPT is its true context window. Word on the street is that it supports 8,000 characters, which is double what GPT-3 came up to this year. I actually think at a technical level, it may have something known as a scratchpad. So the AI model is basically kind of taking notes as it's talking to you. And if that is the case, that it does have scratchpad capabilities, it is also just at a technical engineering AI level, just incredibly, it's like a new paradigm, sort of. So anyways, that's in a nutshell where I think ChatGPT is going.
Well, this has been great. I will say too that there was an exchange I saw on Twitter. Oh, and by the way, on Twitter, ChatGPT sounds to me a lot like experts on Twitter, right? Very frequently saying things that are wrong, but always saying it confidently. So I thought that was really interesting. But this exchange between Sam Altman and Elon Musk, because he talked about ChatGPT, Musk responded, "What's the cost?" And he said he basically said low single cents per chat. He wasn't talking about session versus interaction, so that might be something that's important. But he did say the costs are eye-watering. So the warning to everybody out there: get your ChatGPT experience work done now. It will not be free for much longer, would be my guess.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. Now, so this year I put out a video where I was, fairly concerned and kind of upset about the pricing for DALL-E. I felt they priced it too high. I didn't like the model, and I made a whole podcast episode talking about it, basically. Right. And that's the dedication I bring to the space, and passion. But the point is, like if you compare Dolly versus GPT-3, current GPT-3 I think is quite affordable. Like I make videos about this stuff. I use it more so than the average person. I've never spent more than like $5 a month. Like I'd be shocked if I even hit 5. And so if you're running a business, that's completely different, right? If you're running a business, you're at scale, you do millions of interactions through the GPT-3 OpenAI API, that's a different story. But at the consumer level, I'm not spending that much on GPT-3. And so I still have some qualms with OpenAI's pricing for GPT-3, just the model, not necessarily the rates they set. But all I'm saying is I'm hopeful ChatGPT can also have like affordable pricing, kind of like how we've seen with GPT-3. I hope they continue it. And to be honest, I think it's in their interest to basically, like, I think every year they reduce the pricing of this stuff because it just brings so many new customers in the fold. They make more money, and like I just think they're, as a business, incentivized to bring the cost down over time. So hopefully with ChatGPT they keep it up. Otherwise, the poor students will not be able to afford it.
It won't be able to afford it. Well, BaxTFuture, this has been amazing. Everyone should follow Bax on the Twitter at BaxTFuture. And I hope to have you come back. We should do this again.
Yeah, it'd be awesome. And real quick, let me plug my YouTube, youtube.com/BaxTFuture. I also got a newsletter, bakztfuture.substack.com. I'm going to be putting out an article on my predictions for next year. So make sure everybody checks it out. And on Sunday, I published a new article for like a new kind of language model, which I'm calling a matrix model. It's very interesting. It breaks the rules of language models as we know it. I'm really excited about that. But anyways, thank you so much for having me, Brett. This was awesome.
Synthedia.
Synthedia.substack.com. Synthetic media, virtual humans, voice clones, deepfakes, AI image and text generation news and more.
Hey, thanks for watching. Please like this video and subscribe to help us with YouTube's famed algorithm.